Okay, fellas, it says we're live. We must be live. Want to welcome you guys. It is our monthly work comp today, where Dave and I and one of our buddies, colleagues, a guest. Each month we talk about what is dealing with independent contractors, employees, and employers. And our guest today, coming out of Maryland, is Jonathan Beiser. Hey, Jonathan, thank you for joining us today, bud.
How you doing?
We're doing okay, but more importantly than me or you, we always have to ask Dave before we can dive into these articles. Dave, how are you doing today, bud?
Doing great. Thanks for asking.
Jonathan, one of the things you'll notice in this next 45 minutes to an hour, the enthusiasm shared by David that he expels is beyond, you can't measure it. You really can't.
Well, when you're on camera, you have to be extra expressive, show extra, emotion. And I think I do that.
Well, those Zoom lessons have been paying off. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Dave, what is your nickname for our show here that we really may rebrand it soon?
This is Work Comp for Nerds.
Not a name that mom necessarily likes, but anyway, we'll get started. Guys, it is a goal for us each month when we have our show is to point out what's making the news that impacts our respective practices. Again, it could be Amazon and all of their troubles. It could be gig economy. It could be just folks trying to defraud their respective states and not either on the employer side properly reporting the amount of wages they pay, or it could be on the injured worker side where they're faking an injury, drawing benefits, and working at the same time. You never know. But what does need to be conveyed is what's currently going on. And that's why we've picked out a bunch of articles to go through. So we're going to dive in this first one.
No, I'm going to tell you to hit pause.
That's true.
Because who's our guest?
All right. Thank you. Jonathan, forgive me. This is our first month apparently doing this into our third year of this. And David usually has to pause me. I am so apologize, but we got to spend a great week about 2 months ago out in Arizona with Jonathan and his lovely wife, Sarah. And those conferences, and we'll get to those in a few minutes, but Jonathan, please share about your practice and a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into the articles. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. So I've been at this for 32 years. I started with a bigger firm in the DC area for 26 years. And for the last 6.5 years, I've been originally on my own, now with two associates with the Beiser Law Firm. And what we do is primarily workers' comp. We do Maryland workers' comp. I do a lot of Longshore and Defense Base Act workers' comp. And we also do some personal injury and a little bit of Social Security disability as well.
Well, I want you to share a little bit. Are you hearing some feedback maybe on my end? Share a little bit about Defense-Based Act and Longshoreman Act, because Dave and I don't handle either of those. Although we're close to the Gulf, we really are kind of landlocked and don't get down that far south in our state to handle those types of cases. Who does it impact, and is it similar to state work comp, or are there some real differences there?
So it's similar to state workers' comp, very similar to DC workers' comp. Mm-hmm. Longshore is for longshoremen, people that work on the port, that are either taking materials off the boats or putting them on the boats or working on the docks. When they get hurt on the docks or on the boat, then they have a workers' comp claim. As long as the boat is stable and not moving, it's a longshore claim. Defense Base Act is an extension of that Longshore Act, so it's the same exact law. Defense Base Act covers defense contractors, primarily that get hurt in Afghanistan, Iraq, other countries where the United States military is performing work. Also includes people that are working at the different embassies all over the world. So people that get hurt on the job then file a Defense Base Act workers' comp claim. It's here in the United States, typically where they live, through the Department of Labor. We deal with insurance companies, not the federal government, so it's not federal employee compensation. So they're people that work for defense contractors. A lot of them former military people, but now they're defense contractors, and we deal with insurance companies just like we do in Maryland and Alabama.
You know, Dave, I would think there'd be more occasion for us to handle those kind of cases, the Defense-Based Act cases, but I don't think we really see many of those. Maybe one call a year. You recall the last time you got one of those types of calls coming in?
No, it's infrequent for sure.
You know, we've got Fort McClellan, we've got Redstone Arsenal, we've got several around our state.
So the people that work people that get hurt on the bases here in the U.S. There's another law that I also handle, very simple, that is also an extension of the longshore, called non-appropriated fund non-appropriated fund instrumentalities claims. So those are people that work at the PX, that work childcare on the bases. So if you have those claims, same as the Longshore and Defense-Based Act claim, just their wages are a lot lower because they're working in lower paying jobs on the bases in the U.S.
Sure. Well, I know that certainly makes for an interesting practice that you've got with all those different areas of the law that you cover. But it's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, let's dive into our articles. And guys, at any point in time, if my video is going in and out, it is what it is. You just let me know from time to time. First articles really deals with nationwide. It's psychosocial barriers not uncommon in workers' comp recoveries. And just reading from that title alone to me caught my eye. Jonathan, was there anything either about that article that resonates with your practice that maybe from a practice pointer standpoint that you can share?
It's a very interesting article. 40% of the people that missed work days experienced some kind of psychosocial barrier to being able to get back to work. So a lot of them need some kind of psychological treatment, some kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is great. Travelers, according to the article, has their own app now where they provide that. I think more people, more insurance companies should offer that. A lot of people do have psychological issues in terms of when they get hurt on the job and then returning back to work. Some of them are afraid to go back to work because of how they got hurt or where they got hurt. So very interesting article.
Dave, oftentimes we'll have a traumatic event associated with one of our cases. But what happens when the clients, typically from a physical standpoint, reach maximum improvement? What happens with any of their mental care typically?
You know, I think first off, a lot of work comp carriers do not want to accept a mental injury. Okay. And the article says that, Traveler's doctor says, or is quoted saying, for the first 90 years work comp was around, we did everything possible to avoid dealing with behavioral health issues. We didn't want to, quote, own the psych, unquote, on a claim. Mm-hmm. And so that is something we fight all the time. And I think that adjusters or insurance companies don't like those type claims, the mental side, because you can't see it on an x-ray, right? You can't see that herniation with an MRI. You can't see that broken bone. And you've got to rely on the doctor to treat them and tell them when that person's at maximum medical improvement. So yeah, this is very interesting. And I'm glad that Travelers, which is the country's largest insurer of work comp, is doing this. And they want their people back to work, not just but injured workers back to work, get them back healthier, cuts down on their days away from working. So yeah, interesting. They want healthier, productive workers, and this is one way to get them back.
Yeah, Jonathan, we don't have straight mental cases in Alabama. It's not accepted. I know there are states out there. Does Maryland accept just straight mental cases without physical? injury?
For certain people, for certain cases. So first responders, yes. Especially first responders, EMTs that have to go to a crash site and are dealing with very injured people, dead people. So they can file a claim for a mental injury. They don't need any kind of physical injury to go along with it. Most other ones are very tough. So we do allow it, but it's got to be the right case.
Yeah, unfortunately, one of the things you're going to hear from time to time is how David and I love how Alabama protects its workers.
Or
And
not.
this would not be one of them, of course. Well, fellas, let's put a pause in that one, and let's move on to one that, to me, is where most in Alabama, most of our fights are. It's about getting medical care approved, because that's just where the costs are these days. Average workers' comp settlement for surgery. David, what does that even mean?
That's pretty broad, and the article was broad as well, and it reminds me of situations where our clients get on the internet and start researching, and I see y'all's heads nodding up and down. Your agreement, right? Yeah, I had one last year where a client had a lower leg injury, Alabama work comp claim, and he proceeded to tell me that the average leg injury is $120,000 in Alabama. And I said, well, that's interesting, because the leg is only worth $48,000 in Alabama. So how did you get 120? I read it on the internet. And that's one of these articles right here. And I asked him, I said, send me that information. I want to see that article that you read. And it turned out to be, seriously, Jonathan, a Baltimore, Maryland car wreck lawyer's blog about the average value of a car wreck settlement dealing with a broken leg. And I said, just doesn't apply, man. It just doesn't apply to what we're talking about here today.
I know that attorney. I know I know his website, and I know he's got on there, what's my case worth? And I've had many of my clients saying, well, this lawyer says my case is worth X. Said, well,
Jonathan David has spoken at seminars, and he actually created a skeleton, and he put, what states did you do the comparisons with, Dave?
Yeah, the South. Yeah, what's my arm worth in Alabama? What's my leg worth in Alabama? And then did a comparison of our sister contiguous states. And it's pretty eye-opening as to where we are versus where everybody else is on the values of certain body parts.
I will say this, fellas, going back to the article, I currently have a disputed shoulder injury case. Defense counsel and my client has been prescribed surgery by her personal doctor. We got them to agree to have her evaluated by one of their doctors, who also agrees, but for other reasons, there's defects in the case. They have agreed to mediate the case on a disputed basis. And he intimated, we need to find out what the cost of surgery plus post-surgery rehab would cost, because that's probably all the exposure that they're willing to part with. So from that standpoint, that's why this article caught my attention, because I'm right in one of those types of situations. And again, sadly, I think it's like $22,000 is approximate cost of the type of surgery and post-surgery rehab that she's going to need.
So the article lists spinal fusion at costing $110,000. I don't know what if you have a fee schedule in Alabama, but I know in Maryland we've got a medical fee schedule. Doctors can charge whatever they want to charge. They're not getting paid $110,000 on a spinal fusion. I had a hip replacement 3 months ago. My doctor charged $12,000 for the surgery. The surgery center charged $93,000. Know what they got paid by my health insurance? Altogether about $15,000. So, the article is fine in terms of what these, what they cost, but that's not necessarily what workers' comp pays.
We need those mugs that say, those coffee mugs that say, please don't let Google be a substitute for my law license.
Yeah. Yeah. The takeaway from this article, viewer, is if you have a Maryland work comp claim, call Jonathan. If you have an Alabama work comp claim, call us. Call a lawyer that practices law in your state that handles that particular type of claim.
Now, I can use this in terms of making a demand, settlement demand, and saying, hey, this article says spinal fusion's worth $110,000. Insurance company's not going to go for that.
There you go.
All right, fellas, let's pivot to our third article. Climate change threatens workers' well-being in multiple ways. Workers' comp could be the first line of defense. Interesting title. Jonathan, is there anything in there that really resonated with you, or is it just kind of smoke and mirrors here?
It's all smoke and mirrors. The only thing that resonated was if there's a hurricane or some natural disaster, my client may not be getting paid. They're not going to get their mail, or they may not get their mail for a while. And some insurance companies are starting to do direct deposit more so than sending a check, which is a smart thing to do just in case of some of these issues that happen with climate change. But other than that, it was more smoke and mirrors to me.
Dave?
I think from a legal perspective and from a lawyer perspective, we're going to see this topic on future legal programs that we attend, continuing legal education programs. This is very interesting, especially for our lawyers on coasts. But I agree with you. One of the takeaways is we need more direct deposits for these TTD checks that our clients receive. But so many insurance companies do things in an antiquated way when it comes to our clients' checks. So it would be nice to see direct deposits for more carriers.
Something I just thought about, Jonathan, in the south part of the state, we have one of those catastrophic insurance companies that hires adjusters all over the country as soon as there's some type of a big event. Weather-wise, they hire them and send them out to evaluate property damage claims, et cetera. And David and I have handled numerous cases of folks who live in the Midwest or in the Northeast, these adjusters who are hired on a part-time or again, depending on those events. And those injuries to those individuals are pretty horrible for the most part. They involve
falling off roofs.
Yeah.
They're falling off ladders. They're falling off roofs because they're inspecting roofs because of wind and rain damage. And you go up high on something and miss your ladder, miss a step. You're usually breaking something.
I just wrapped up 2 significant cases in the last 60 days for just that very situation. So I guess the weather must have something to do with the increased number of claims. All right, guys, before we jump into the fourth article, I want to take a pause and I want to talk about the organization that we all three belong to. I'm on the board. David is an officer. Jonathan, please forgive me. I can't remember if you're also on the board.
I am. And I'm also the Longshore co-chair. So
thank you. I didn't appreciate that, but thank you for doing that. David, I'm going to let you tell a brief explanation what our organization is, and then I've got a question or two for Jonathan about our annual meeting.
Sure. The organization we're talking about is the Workers' Injury Law and Advocacy Group, also known as WILG, W-I-L-G. We are over 1,000 lawyers strong organization comprised of lawyers from every state in the country. And we are claimants lawyers. We represent injured workers. We don't defend insurance companies. We represent injured workers. And it's just a group of like-minded lawyers who help people who've been injured at work or their families as well. And it's a great organization, and we've gotten to meet great lawyers like Jonathan from around the country.
Jonathan, I have my opinion. I know Dave has his. What's your opinion of our annual seminar conference that we go to?
It's great. I look forward to it every year. My wife looks forward to it every year. She calls it camp for her while I'm in, while I'm in the seminars or giving seminars. She's at the pool hanging with your wives. And we've made really great friends by going to the annual conference every year. The education is great and it's a lot of fun.
And you just hit on the key word to me is friends. And it's that networking event over those 3 or 4 or 5 days that not just annually, because there's regional conferences and there's specialty conferences, but to me, one of the greatest benefits is the network. And if I have a case in Maryland, I know immediately who I'm calling. We have friends we've made friends in just about every state. And I just think that's one of the remarkable benefits of being part of that organization.
Yeah.
So I echo you both.
Fabulous organization.
Well, and we'll get back to them in a minute, but let's head to California, where they have suspended nearly 200 medical providers from the state work comp system. Now, I will say this as a side note, Jonathan, David and I have noticed in our practice, and I suspect you may echo this, it is harder and harder and harder to find workers' comp approved doctors in our state. And we have an operation or procedure under our law that when our client is going through medical care and gets sideways or doesn't agree with the authorized doctor's care or opinions, we can ask for a panel of 4. And that's 4 doctors we can choose from. The insurance company still pays for it. Well, those numbers of doctors, particularly for certain specialties, are shrinking because the doctors are fed up with the system. Now, that's not what this article is about, but I wanted your opinion. Are you seeing more and more doctors leaving the work comp world or not necessarily?
So just like Alabama, we have problems mainly with neurologists. So orthopedists, we actually had an issue years ago, probably about 10 years ago when, as I said earlier, we have a medical fee schedule. Mm-hmm. So doctors can bill whatever they want, but they're only getting paid per the fee schedule. And our fee schedule, at least for orthopedics, is I think 6 or 7% higher than Medicare. So orthopedics, we don't really have a problem getting good doctors. Neurologists, for whatever reason, we can't find neurologists, especially in the county where I am, that want to take a Maryland workers' comp claim. It's a problem. Fortunately, in Maryland, we get to choose our own doctor. We don't have the insurance company giving us a panel. It's great. Yeah, we get to get our clients to the best doctors available. We've got in DC, we've got Georgetown and GW. Up in Baltimore, we got Johns Hopkins. So we can get our clients to some of the best doctors in the area, especially if they need surgery or some kind of specialized care. We don't have a panel.
Yeah, it must be nice.
It is nice.
We can count on about 6 hands the number of doctors who we'd like to never ever see again, and maybe on 2 hands the doctors we want our patients always to go to. But this is this article is obviously a different different topic of why they're no longer part of the system. And I'll ask you, Jonathan, have you either personally heard of or been involved in maybe Maryland or DC doctors who found their fate in this same as these California doctors?
Unfortunately, a pretty good friend of mine, old fraternity brother of mine, was a chiropractor and got a little greedy and was doing some billing for clients or for some of his patients. I do believe a couple of my clients were involved in that, unfortunately, but he ended up getting sued by a number of insurance companies, lost his license, and now he's selling real estate. It happens more so, we see it more so with chiropractors. There's also chiropractors or else pain management doctors. Those are the ones that seem to be getting in trouble.
I'm glad that you mentioned pain management because Dave, we're both very familiar with a couple of cases in north part of the state where pain management doctors have gotten themselves not disbarred, but losing their license and then also being prosecuted as well. But there's, with any system that's in place, there's always people looking to go around or to cheat the system. But 200 doctors, that's a lot. But then again, California's population is multiple times of our respective states. So maybe on scale, it's not as big as it seems. All right, fellas, we're going to move on to number 5, wearable tech. Real-time ergonomic data is a work comp game changer. Now, I don't know, Jonathan, I don't know about you, but it seems like everybody I see has some version of Apple Watch, Fitbit, whatever, or Whoop, whatever those are. And for me personally, I have to put my watch away sometimes because it's too much. But for these insurance companies and for work comp folks, that I guess it's a saver for them. Anything, you take anything out of this article that really applies to our practices respectively?
Investigating injuries, they can use this technology to determine what caused the injury. That doesn't necessarily help us. Could help us, but sometimes it, more so, it may hurt. One thing that I did get out of it is insurance companies are using it to see how workers fatigue over time and how their work changes as they fatigue. That could be a good thing.
Dave, one thing I thought about when I was looking at this, how we've argued for years that when one of our clients is ordered and they go through a functional capacities evaluation, what we know as an FCE, it's not a perfect test. It's 2, 3, 4 hours of our client trying to do certain activities, lifting, pushing, pulling, whatever. But we've also argued for forever to our clients, if this was a 40-hour work week, you don't give full 100% exertion all the time, but they want to go in and do their best. They want to show what they can do. So here's my comment to that. Do you think wearing some of this technology somehow can be interplayed with the argument of an FCE's imperfection? I don't, maybe I'm not asking it the right way, but it just seems like this technology can either help refine or blow up what an FCE is intended to do.
Yeah, with a lot of these FCEs, they're measuring heart rate. And so maybe that's a good indicator, but maybe this sensor technology can give some other data that would show, because so often with these FCEs, you get the report back, they didn't give maximum effort, or I only graded them at a 75 and at 80s where they needed to be for us to know that they gave good effort. And there's a lot of subjectivity, I think, in those functional capacity evaluation reports.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't fully indicate objectively how pain interjects into here as well. Jonathan, anything else you take away from this, or are you ready to move on to our next one?
Not a whole lot. The companies that get to use it can use it for safety, which hopefully they're going to do more so than use it in a bad way to try to hurt our clients' claims. If there's more safety, that's better for everybody.
It certainly is. And for those of you just joining us or maybe catching us on replay, this is our monthly Work Comp Today YouTube live program with our guest and our friend, colleague is Jonathan Beiser out of Maryland, Beiser Law Firm. And we're running through our articles as we do in the first half of each episode. And we've got some other stuff where we'll compare Alabama and Maryland procedures and laws in a few minutes. But we've gotten to our final article. Again, this one comes from California. I could not find anything in the last 3 or 4 months out of Maryland. I tried to find an article on the home state of our guest, but I just couldn't find anything. And I knew we didn't want to talk about the Ravens or the Orioles today on this show. We'd save that for another program.
I'm a DC guy. I'm a DC suburb guy. I'm a Nationals fan and a what I call commies fan now.
Oh, that's what's so funny. But we could definitely derail this conversation in that direction. OC workers' comp attorney gets 4 years in prison for fraud. And David, I did check. This person is not a member. So I felt confident we could talk about this article.
Good.
And, we've shown how the doctors can get off the rails and not do the right thing and they get caught. Dave, what happened to this Orange County work comp lawyer?
Yeah, so this lawyer is representing injured workers. I'm sure he represented a lot of legitimate injured workers, but he's also cooking up a scheme with chiropractors and getting funneled clients who may not have been legitimately injured. So he was convicted this year of 37 felony counts of insurance fraud. So he's going to jail. He's going to jail for 4 years, and he has to pay over $700,000 in restitution. So a lawyer looking for an easy way and got busted, and I'm glad he's going to jail.
The articles like this hopefully help keep everyone else in line. They certainly give our profession a black eye, that it's very easy for the common public who don't have a lawyer or don't know lawyers or deal with them. It's easy for them to just write off that all lawyers are crooked, can't trust them. But that's so far from the truth. It's the minuscule number of lawyers who go rogue. And Jonathan, as I was reading this, I really was, you think behind the scenes or behind the article, is it greed? Did he get caught up? Did he have other issues in his life where he had to hurry up and make some cash? You never know. Not that it really matters, or excuses the act, but we've all know those lawyers who've gotten in trouble, David, and I know several who've had similar instances where they've gotten in trouble and been disbarred or jailed or both.
Unfortunately, I know one or two that were not really greedy, but just made a mistake here or there with commingling some of the client funds. That's more so what we see here, not really anything like what this attorney did out in Orange County. He was sending out 4 million flyers a month to try to get Hispanic clients.
Amazing.
So I don't know how California workers' comp works. They must pay a lot of money per claim.
Well, it certainly doesn't work the way he was doing it, or at least not.
That's a lot of paper, and that must be a lot of copy machines that were
exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Jonathan, do y'all still use copier machines in the office?
We do, and we got a copier. We do a lot of. And we're trying to become paperless more so, but I'm still old school. I still like having a file.
I don't mean to humble brag, but I'll let David tell you the year we got rid of our copier.
It's been so long, I don't even remember.
We haven't had a copier in almost 13 years.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
You scan everything?
Everything gets scanned. If everybody has a printer at their own station, but we truly try to be as digital as we can. Now, we haven't tried a work comp case digitally fully yet, but those days are, I think, coming.
They are coming.
Yeah. Well, our judges still like paper submissions. If you're submitting the medical records, they still want a 3-ring binder with all the records in them.
So when COVID started, our workers' comp commission started going more paperless, and we started submitting all our exhibits prior to the hearing by uploading it to the workers' comp commission website. we used to do pre-COVID, you would bring stacks of exhibits and just hand it to the commissioner that morning. And commissioner would hear 20 cases, and then afterwards, and they go home or they go to their office and they go read through all the paperwork afterwards.
20 and one, my gosh.
Yeah.
David had a trial in West Alabama about 6-7 years ago, and was, as he is very succinct and just puts in front of the judge as orderly as possible. Defense brought in multiple bankers boxes full of every medical record you could ever think of. And the judge basically said, what am I supposed to do with all this?
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I was trying a work comp case and defense counsel was trying a negligence case.
Exactly.
And I was like, okay.
Crazy,
Yeah.
but anyway.
One thing about our system
Yeah.
in Maryland, which is very good, we get hearings pretty quickly. So we can get a hearing usually within about 6 or 8 weeks. So if somebody's not getting paid or not getting treatment, we get a hearing. And our hearings before our workers' comp commissioners are not long. I'd say typically anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes for most issues. Some cases may go as long as an hour. That's why the commissioners can hear so many cases. They make a decision. It's they issue an order just on that issue. It's not a lengthy. It's a one-page decision based upon that. Now, if either party's unhappy with that, then we can get a jury trial.
Yeah, we're litigation based. We file in circuit court, and this is going to lead us into our second part of the show. We're litigation based, which means if you file a lawsuit, you don't have to, and we don't most of the time. You're in front of a circuit judge, just a judge, and everything runs through litigation, through the court system. But David, could you imagine a 20-minute trial? I mean, ours may be a couple of days, maybe as many as 3 days, depending on
the number. Our appeals can be a day or two long or 3 days long, depending on how many witnesses you have. But at our initial hearings, was paper. Now it's all online, but you're submitting reports. And the commissioner's looking at the reports and making decisions based upon the reports. Doctors do not come live to our workers' comp hearings. Doctors do come live, or we put them on video for our jury trials, for our appeals.
They come kicking and screaming with court order to anything we ask. But Jonathan, let's talk about in court versus what I'll call out of court settlements. Dave, I'll let you go first and just briefly hit the highlights about how we can resolve our cases out of court or in court. Now that we've had changes with the pandemic. And then Jonathan, share how in Maryland and DC you do the same.
Sure. Pre-pandemic, if you had a filed lawsuit and you settled it, then you would have to have court approval. Judge had to review everything and determine that the settlement was in the injured worker's best interest. If you did not have a filed lawsuit and you settled, that settlement could be approved through the Alabama Department of Labor Ombudsman Program. Post-COVID or post-pandemic, during the pandemic, an order was issued which allowed that Alabama Department of Labor Ombudsman Program to approve settlements, even if the case was in court, even if it was a filed case. So you didn't have to go back to the judge to have it approved. And so that made things a lot more efficient. So you could get approval through the Alabama Department of Labor and file in a motion to dismiss your court case. So that sped up the ability to finalize the settlement and get our client money to them faster, because some judges can't see you for 6 to 8 weeks. Some of them are so backed up, but the ombudsman can typically get to us within a couple of weeks, which is great for our clients.
And we try to stack multiple cases in one day with the same ombudsman. And the other thing, David, I missed if you said it, we also, for those who can't physically get to the office, have the ability with some new procedures, or I guess there are laws now, that allow for Zoom witnessing or FaceTime witnessing of notary of signature. So you don't have to have a wet signature in front of you signed for the notary to do their part. And that really is such a game changer when you have a client who lives 3 hours away or can't get out of their respective, their home.
Maryland's quite different. Maryland is a lot easier system. So not all, actually in Maryland, a lot of cases do not settle. And we go to a hearing, we either go to a hearing or we stipulate, come to an agreement as to what the permanent and partial disability is. The client gets paid. Medically, their claim remains open the rest of their life. If their condition worsens, if we do a stipulation or get an award from a workers' comp hearing, we have 5 years to reopen the claim for a worsening of condition. The cases that do settle are typically contested cases or cases where the client's no longer with that employer and the employer or their insurance company want to try to settle the claim. When we have any kind of settlement that we have, the Workers' Comp Commission has to approve the settlement. And it does not take long. Our settlement agreements are pretty standard, and we don't have to get a notary to sign it. The client signs it. We have to sign it. We submit it. Commission usually approves it within about a week or so of when we submit it to the Workers' Comp Commission. Even on appeals that go up to the circuit court, if there's a settlement or if there's whatever the decision is by the judge or the jury, still has to be remanded back to the Workers' Comp Commission for the commission to pass an order as to what was decided. So Maryland's pretty easy in that regard. We don't have to wait for judges to approve it. We just submit it to the Workers' Comp Commission.
Jonathan, sometimes our settlement agreements get to be so complicated that it takes days or weeks to figure out what the proper language is. Because if we've got to deal with a disputed case and maybe you've got a Medicare concern, maybe you've got a subrogation and a third party case, sometimes even after, what am I, in my 26th, 27th year, it takes a while sometimes. But anyway, that was one area. Now I want to talk about what we commonly refer to as wolves in sheep's clothing. Dave, what am I talking about here?
Case managers or case nurses.
No, couldn't be. Jonathan, we tell our clients, if you have a good relationship with your case nurse, that's pretty rare, but it's good for you. And most of those case nurses, make no mistake about it, they're very good at their job. But their job is to report back to the insurance company and to save the insurance company money. So we have a standard letter we send out when we send our letter of rep to the adjuster. We send another letter to the case nurse that basically says everything runs through us or through our firm communication wise, and we want you out of the room when you're with our client and when the doctor's meeting with the client. What's your take? How do you approach case nurses and your clients?
So ours is the same. Quite often the insurance companies do assign nurse case managers. Now we sometimes just deal with telephonic ones. Those are absolutely fine. They're really just checking with the client to see what's happening with their treatment. If they need any authorizations, they can help try to get authorization for treatment a little quicker. Then there's the field case managers that like to go to the doctor's office with the client. I've got the same exact rule. I tell the nurse case manager, fine for you to go to the appointment, but you're not going in the exam room when my client's in there with the doctor. If the doctor wants to talk to you afterwards, that's up to the doctor. And just like you said, some of them are really, really good. And some of them are looking out for the client and for the claimant and for their best interest. A lot of them most of them are insurance hacks. They're insurance agents, even though they work for another company, a private company. Their job is to try to save the insurance company any costs for medical treatment, try to get the client back to work as soon as possible. And they try to pressure the doctors to release the client back to work.
And gosh, some of them get so butthurt when you tell them they have to stay outside.
We don't have a problem with that. At least I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I almost always consent to them being involved in the case, again, because it can help my client get authorization quicker.
We do a lot of
But when there's,
education.
when there are some that are really just there to get my client back to work as soon as possible and not really allow them to get the treatment, yeah, that's when I'll speak up a little bit more and try to get them to back off, make sure they are not in the room, and see if we can get the doctor to just tell them to butt out. And it's the doctor's the boss, not this nurse case manager.
Yeah. David, I can't remember if it was my client or yours who reported back to us. I saw that case nurse bringing cookies to the nursing in the break room. What do I need to do about that? And then
Pretty common.
you continue your education of your client and prepping them.
Yeah.
Fellas, we got one last topic. I know you're sad to know that we're getting closer to the end of this month's episode. I want to talk about second opinions. We call them panel of four. Dave, how do they operate? Bad pun on my part. How does a panel of four work in Alabama? And talk about the surgical panel as well.
Sure. So if the injured worker is dissatisfied with their initial treating physician, and that's the doctor that work comp assigns to them, then they can request what's called a panel of four physicians. And work comp will put four doctors on a list, and the doctors are supposed to be of the same practice area as the doctor that is being replaced. So if he's seeing a back doctor, then we should get four back doctors on the panel. And Jonathan, we talked about it earlier. It's sometimes hard to find four doctors in an area especially if it's a rural area. So it's going to require our clients to drive to a bigger city. We also have a second panel known as a panel of four surgeons. So if the treating physician orders surgery, then the injured worker can request a panel of four surgeons, and work comp will provide four surgeons of that same practice area, and the injured worker can go to that new physician, or new surgeon, and choose that doctor to be their new surgeon, or just kind of get a second opinion as to whether they need that surgery, and they could go back to the original surgeon if they choose.
One last thing, Jonathan, before we throw it to you. Just because our client chooses Dr. X from the panel doesn't mean Dr. X automatically has to take our client as their new patient. They get the opportunity to review the records and make a decision. And that's where the delay comes in a lot of times, the frustration on our clients. I once had it's a case I resolved about 2 years ago. It took 14 months, honest to goodness, to find a new doctor. And ultimately they approved, and this is extremely rare, they approved her primary care physician because we had burned through so many doctors who would not take her case, was finally approved as the authorized treating physician. And they could have just done that 14 months prior, and it would have saved so much problems. But how do you deal with that in your practice in DC and Maryland?
Okay, we don't have a panel. So in Maryland, it's the claimant's choice to pick a doctor. Now, if the doctor is recommending surgery, the insurance company has the right to set up a defense medical exam and send them to one of their hacks, which happens all the time. And same thing with permanent partial disability. When we get a permanent impairment rating from our doc, insurance company sends them to their doc and to do their permanent impairment. But we don't have to worry about any panels. So if there's a dispute, if our doctor says if the treating doc says that they need surgery, the defense medical exam doc says no, it's up to the commissioner to decide. The Workers' Comp Commission does have a medical doctor that they can also refer stuff to the doctor, and then that doctor may refer it out to another doctor just for another opinion. But it's generally up to the Workers' Comp Commissioner to make a medical decision, whether or not the surgery is warranted, whether or not the treatment is warranted. And again, if they make a decision, if either party's unhappy, you can appeal it and get a jury trial.
Such a different world.
Yeah.
Such a different world. Well, fellas, we've come to the end of our content for this month. Jonathan, I want to thank you for putting up with Dave and me for this
My
hour.
pleasure.
We appreciate your friendship and can look forward to getting together with you again. Hopefully not next October, hopefully before then. But thank you, Bud, for spending some time with us.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
You guys be well. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All righty.
It's an honored tradition, Jonathan, before we conclude. We always ask Dave for some sage parting advice. Typically he lets us down, but I have a feeling he's going to come through in the clutch today. Dave?
I had something prepared, and I think I left it in the car.
Any backup material?
Be kind. Be nice to your neighbor.
And don't eat too much too soon next Thursday. You got to pace yourself. There's a lot of football to be watched. There's a long nap somewhere in there. But Jonathan, thank you again.
Cocking a
bud.
turkey.
Yeah, hang on. I'm going to sign off of YouTube, but hang on for just a second. You guys, we're not going to do a show in December. Dave, frowny face. We'll be back in January with Work Comp Today. Y'all be